Season 2 leaderboard. Again, he's already qualified for the Players' Championship, so that doesn't really matter outside of buys for the Invitational. If you're in the top 16 on our Open Series leaderboard, you get 2 buys at an Invitational. If you're 17 through 32, you get 1, and he's playing against Chris Conklin, who is playing Jund Monsters, as we begin round number 1 here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I kind of like Brian's deck simply because Eidolon of Blossoms is a very, very effective threat against Mono Black Devotion. So if you expect a lot of those types of decks, then it's actually kind of a reasonable choice, even though it might be a little off the radar.
Conklin going to start off with a couple of Scry lands, Malice and Abandon, as he looks to figure out where he wants to keep, and that top one's going to go to the bottom before he passes the turn back. Van Meter, just an Overgrown Tomb, now a Swamp. He'll follow it up with a Sylvan Caryatid and pass the card back. One of the best cards at the Block Pro Tour, making an appearance here.
Yeah, so this should be interesting because Brian, obviously, he's playing against Jund Monsters. His car mate and his teammate, Chris Van Meter, very, very familiar with this deck, so he probably has a lot of practice against Jund Monsters. Chris, on the other side of the table, though, probably hasn't played against Black-Green Constellation very much, so it'd be interesting to see how this one plays out, particularly after sideboard.
Courser of Krufix is going to be played here. Going to show a Hero's Downfall. See if Brian does have a third land to play. It looks like he does have a Temple of Plenty in his hand. The white splash, very minimal here. It looks like it's just for Banishing Light in his deck. Another enchantment. Also has a couple copies of Elspeth, which Brian doesn't seem to really leave home without, as he's going to gain a life here from the Courser, resolve the Scry from the Temple. Looks like he's going to leave the Hero's Downfall on top, as Abrupt Decay will take care of the Courser, as Conklin will untap and take his 4th turn. Pulachronos was the draw. This is a Forest, and it looks like we are going to see the 4/4, actually a different copy. He's got another one in his hand, which is the old school version. This is the promo version.
Yeah, so Brian does have an answer to it in the Hero's Downfall that he revealed last turn. But again, this is kind of one of the reasons people like Jund Monsters is you have so many threats. You have Pulachronos, Stormbreath Dragon, so there's only so many removal spells that your opponent can have. And usually, the only ones that can really deal with your threats are cards like Hero's Downfall.
Brian can use Banishing Light to take care of the Pulachronos. Reason probably being he wants to save the Hero's Downfall for Stormbreath Dragon, a card that we have mentioned several times today, as Banishing Light will not take care of that due to protection from white. As Conklin, he takes a look at his hand. He does have another copy of Pulachronos. You see the Dreadbore over there as well, a Burning Tree Emissary, a card you don't see in Jund Monsters all that often. That's a 4 of in his deck this particular weekend. He's going to go with actually another card we don't see very often, Nylea, God of the Hunt, the green god showing up to the party as just a 1 of.
Interesting. So maybe that's another reason for the Burning Tree Emissary, try to help get devotion. But yeah, you don't see that very often.
Temple of Plenty going to come in here for Brian. Scry can leave the top card on top. Figure out what he wants to do this go around. You also see a Mana Bloom in Brian's hand right now, so he's really brewing. Mana Bloom, of course, with Eidolon of Blossoms, is certainly a card drawing engine. It's a little delayed and unique, but it is definitely an engine.
You are correct in that it is an engine.
I'm using the term engine
very
loosely this morning, yeah. And then Mana Bloom is going to be 4/2 before passing the turn back.
So Conklin draws yet another Pulachronos. And unfortunately, he doesn't have that much mana. So, and again, Jund Monsters has a lot of threats, but they're kind of bulky. So you can't actually do that much with them. And Abrupt Decay, that turns off the devotion for the Nylea.
Yeah, so what he does there, you see Mana Bloom, he removes a charge counter, add 1 mana of any color. You can activate this ability only once per turn. And he uses that plus the Caryatid to Abrupt Decay the Emissary to make it so the Nylea actually is removed from combat because the devotion has not been met. As Brian does play a Courser, reveals Eidolon of Blossoms. Mana Bloom looks like it's going to be used for some more mana here. There's a Hero's Downfall. Oh, the value. And then it comes back, and then, oh my goodness. Can you see what's happening here?
That was a pretty good reveal for Brian. The Eidolon of Blossoms on top of his deck is kind of like the cornerstone of his deck, really gets his deck going. It looks like Chris will have an answer for it, but is he going to use it on the Courser here? I think he has to be wary because he knows how good Eidolon of Blossoms is, or could be.
Yeah, Dreadbore and Pulachronos are the last 2 cards right now in Conklin's hand. I think, as he did play his dual land on tap, I think he's deciding exactly how he wants to use these 2 cards. He's going to start by just playing the legendary Hydra and just simply passing the turn back.
Yeah, it looked like he thought about killing the Courser of Krufix. Obviously, that's a good card too, but I think knowing that the Eidolon of Blossoms is coming, he needs to save it to deal with that card. Even though his card disadvantage, he still needs to just get that Eidolon of Blossoms off the table.
So he does hold the Dreadbore before passing the turn back over to Braun-Duin. You see Brian taking a look at his hand right now. It's got the Eidolon, Brain Maggot on top, Courser in play. Also has another copy of Hero's Downfall in his hand. Could fire that off to take care of Pulachronos, but that would be basically his entire turn depending on how he wants to use Mana Bloom.
Yeah, the problem for Brian is he can't just cast the Eidolon here. because he wouldn't be able to, he'll just lose it to the Palakranos activation instead. So I think he's going to have to kill the Palakranos first and wait a turn, which again, I think is fine because he's really not under any pressure. He's at 21. Nylea won't be active to be turned on as a creature. So I think it's fine to maybe play Bloom and just Hero's Downfall here. So looks like that's what he's going to do.
Well, there's step one. There's the Hero's Downfall. Of course, you're going to come into the red zone as Nylea cannot block. Devotion is not met. Here's 2 mana. There's the Bloom. That's going to be for 1. He just passes the turn back.
So next turn could be very good for Brian because he can cast Eidolon and then cast Brain Maggot to actually take the Dreadbore out of Chris Conklin's hand and draw a card. So it could be a pretty good turn for Brian next turn.
Another fun of has shown up here for Conklin. It is a Garrett Caller of Beasts. Just a 1 of in his deck. It's going to take up to 5. Time to reveal 5 cards. You see a bunch of lands, an Elvish Mystic, and a Sylvan Caryatid. So all things considered, not the worst place in the world to be for Brian. Is just 2 mana accelerants show up from the Garrick, but it is very important for him to get that thing off of the table because that thing can take a game over all by itself.
Yeah, and Brian doesn't have enough power to really attack it next turn. Even though Chris doesn't have any blockers, he's only got that Courser in play. So it looks like Chris will be able to get another activation off of Garrick. So let's see if Brian can kind of get some pressure here.
There's a Forest, so he can put that into play right away if he'd like to with the Courser, and it looks like that's where he's going to start. So trigger that, going to go up to 22. Top card now is another copy of Mana Bloom. So he wants to navigate this turn because the Garrick is the big problem right now. Even though the first one missed, the second one can be a lot scarier.
Yeah, the good thing for Brian that Garrick isn't nearly as threatening out of a deck like Jund Monsters as it is against a deck like Devotion because of Nykthos. Chris is going to be able to generate a lot of card advantage, but he can't cast all his threats in 1 turn. So I think Brian still can navigate this pretty well. But again, Elspeth certainly helps things.
Yeah. That's the top card of Brian's deck, is now he's going to cast a Brain Maggot. The new Mesmeric Fiend going to come into play, but it is an enchantment. Seems like it's kind of tacked on there, but important for Eidolon and Blossoms, that is in play. It's going to draw Brian a card. The Elspeth's going to go to the grip. Courser is on top, revealed from the Courser in play, and now the Maggot is going to take the Dreadbore. So just the 2 creatures over there in Conklin's hand, and Sylvan Caryatid and Elvish Mystic. As Brian is really starting to put his card advantage engine online. Courser's going to come in here, put Garrick down to 3, but as you mentioned, Garrick's going to get another activation.
Yeah, so Garrick's getting another activation. Chris really needs like a Stormbred Dragon here, probably. Not sure what else realistically is going to help him get out of this one.
Mana Bloom is going to remove a counter to cast another Mana Bloom. That'll cantrip. And that'll have the Courser of Brian's grip. Mutavault will be the top card, and Brian will pass the turn back with those Mana Blooms coming back on the next turn for some more card advantage. Xenagos was the draw here for Conklin. It's not the Planeswalker, though. It is the God of Revels, a card that we have not seen that much of since it was released. As Garrick will take up here, you see a Forest, a Domri, another copy of Xenagos, a Sylvan Caryatid, and an Overgrown Tomb. So Brian definitely dodging some bullets here.
Yeah, he did not have to face a Stormbred Dragon yet. Even Palakranos would have been a pretty good hit there. Fortunately for Brian, he just has to deal with Xenagos and a couple of Mana Dorks.
Now, Conklin can work his way towards the Devotion for these creatures. You see he's got 3 Devotion on the table. He only needs 2 more for Nylea, and then Xenagos is close as a result as well. So he's definitely working towards something, but is that something good enough? We're going to find out, as here is Xenagos. Follow that up with an Elvish Mystic. So now Nylea's on. Xenagos will actually target Nylea. They're teaming up, and into the red zone we go, and attack here for 12. Now, don't forget, Nylea does give every other creature trample, but it doesn't get trample itself.
Yeah, so Brian could choose to chump block here, but I don't see him doing that. I mean, he doesn't want to lose his Eidolon Blossom, and if he loses his Maggot Carrier, Brain Maggot, he's just going to give the Dreadbore back to Chris. So I think he's just going to have to settle for taking 12 here and drop the 10.
You make it sound like it's so casual. Just a 12-point hit in the face, no big deal.
Yeah, so Xenagos can get pretty nasty next turn, especially because it'll have trample because of the Nylea. If Chris can turn it on, which it looks like he should be able to next turn.
Yeah, assuming a Garrick activation and some other things, I think he should be able to do that, as Brian just kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, all right, I will take all of that damage and go down to 10. Brian knows all of the cards right now in Conklin's hand, since they are all from Garrick. Mana Blooms are going to go back to the grip. Mutavault will go to the hand as well. Now there's another copy of Elspeth for Braun-Duin. We'll see exactly how he wants to navigate this turn.
Yeah, he can't. Realistically, he can attack, drop Garrick down to, if Chris decides to chump block, yeah, he still can't deal with the Garrick this turn, I don't think. Maybe he wants to try to draw into something here.
Oh, looks like he's going to go Bloomin'. And this is, again, just going to... Mana Bloom is X and a green, so he can just play it for 1 green. It won't be able to add any mana, but what it will do more importantly is just draw Brian a card for 1 green mana. So he does draw another copy of Elspeth. Already had one, so 2 in the grip. There's a Mutavault. Going to trigger the Courser, go up to 11. Top card now is a Temple of Plenty.
Yeah, so Brian had a mana in his hand, so if he didn't hit a land, he could have. He had a Mutavault in his hand already, so if he didn't hit one, he could have still played it and cast the Elspeth this turn. But I think he's just trying to draw into a Hero's Downfall, perhaps, or a Banishing Light, more likely.
You see him rocket back and forth in his chair. We've seen this before. He is moving into the tank now, trying to figure out what he can do to get himself out of this situation. Didn't expect to see those 2 gods in play together, I'm sure, along with Garrick as well, kind of putting some real tension on this game if he has to take care of some real issues out here.
Yeah, it might not even be right for Brian to actually cast the Elspeth here. He might want to just try to draw into something else. He has another Courser, but he likely would have played the Courser first if that was his plan and gain 2 life as opposed to 1.
Hey, he's also got the other Mana Bloom, too, that he could cantrip, draw the Temple of Plenty, see what the top card is, which is a mystery.
I think Brian's real fear here is, am I just going to lose to a top deck Stormbreath Dragon because of Xenagos?
Yeah. Looks like it might be time to gear up some attackers here, and that's what's going to happen. So Elvish Mystic's going to get in the way of Courser. 2 damage will be dealt to Garrick. So that's going to go down to 2. We'll see what Brian's follow-up play is going to be. It's a pretty attractive to cast Elspeth right now, simply because it's Elspeth.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. So Sun's Champion comes in, up to 5. 3 soldier tokens are coming. You see a cluttered board here. This is probably how Brian wants things to go typically. But Nylea's Trample is actually causing a huge problem here, as is the Xenagos. So
yeah, it's that Trample that really made me wonder whether or not he wants to try to draw into something more. Just because, you know, Nylea's pump ability plus the Trample, you know, he's going to get another activation with Garrick, so he's going to be able to find something that'll likely get him.
So there's no way he can't find a Stormbreath now. Like, he's almost through half his deck, and he does find one along with a copy of Burning Tree Emissary. So those 3 lands are going to go to the bottom, but Stormbreath is going to go to the grip. So now Conklin can start coming across in the sky, and that in combination with Xenagos is going to be a whole bunch of damage now.
Yeah, the Burning Tree alone will be able to turn on every god in play right now.
You know, it's kind of an unorthodox build. We label the deck Jund Monsters, and realistically it is. You know, he is those 3 colors. It's just a different build. I was kind of curious on why Burning Tree Emissary is in here. It kind of makes sense now, given Xenagos and Nylea, and the fact that it can turn both those cards on.
Yeah, his deck certainly seems more resilient to cards like Supreme Verdict or all the heavy removal decks that we've kind of seen in the past, just because the gods are so difficult to deal with. Let's see what Chris wants to do here. I'm not sure he's going to be able to do Burning Tree, Stormbreath. You can get those 2 into play. Stormbreath can get pumped by Xenagos.
He can also just attack with Xenagos and Nylea too, because those will both be on. Like, that's a pretty good turn.
Yeah. So it looks like, yeah, we're gonna get both those guys into play. He could actually give the Burning Tree the Xenagos ability so it can attack this turn as well.
Sure.
So he can attack with all his creatures this turn if he wants to, and they'll all have trample except for Nylea.
So triggering Xenagos, you saw him point to it. The question is, where does he want to trigger it to? And once he does figure that out, we'll see exactly how he's going to get in the red zone, because we know he's attacking this turn. I can promise you that. It looks like he's going to target Stormbreath Dragon, so Burning Tree is going to stay back at home. You've got a 6/6 non-trampler Nylea coming in. You've got an 8-power Dragon with trample, but there are no flying blockers out there. And then you've got Xenagos.
And the trample, and I think he ends up dying, right?
Yeah, there's the trample damage. Yep, and that's going to do it. So Chris Conklin is going to win game number 1 here over Braun-Duin. Jund Monsters, an unorthodox build, does win over a very more standard, typical deck in the black-green constellation.
Yeah, and I think if you're Brian there, I think you have to kind of play the Courser and try to draw into either Banishing, probably Banishing Light's your best card there, just because you can't afford to die to top deck Stormbreath Dragon.
Sure. Because
of Nylea's trample ability and the Xenagos giving creatures haste and double their power, you just need to find an answer to that, I think. If you just tap out for Elspeth, you're basically saying, okay, there's probably not a Stormbreath in the top 5 cards or top 6 cards in my opponent's deck, which is very unlikely given how the first few turns went.
We'll take a look at sideboards. You've got BBDs in front of you. What do you see as far as help is concerned?
All right, well, he's got 4 copies of Thoughtseize, which I think you need to bring in, particularly against a deck like this, just because Stormbreath Dragon and all those Planeswalkers and Gods can be very problematic for you. So I think you want to bring those cards in. Also, 2 copies of Doomblade. Obviously, Doomblade very good against Stormbreath Dragon and Polychronos. Not so much against the Gods, but still gives them more answers to those cards. So I think Doomblade and Thoughtseize are probably the main cards he's going to be bringing in. He does have 2 copies of Opposite Up Council, which could help him win. He was having a difficult time really attacking Chris. Even though he was able to get a lot of card advantage, he wasn't able to close out the game. So Opposite Up's an option for him. He's got another Underworld Connections, a Golgari Charm, 2 copies of Bioblight. None of those cards really seem that strong in this matchup. Along with 3 copies of Nyx Fleece Ram. Nyx Fleece Ram could get you a little life, but in this particular matchup, having an 0-5 blocker really isn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
So I really think it's probably just Thoughtseize, Doomblade, and possibly Opposite Up.
On the other side here, for Conklin, again, up a game with his Jund Monsters brew. He's got 2 Fogs, 3 Destructive Revelries, 2 Mistcutter Hydra, 2 Nylea's Disciple, 2 Scavenging Ooze, 2 copies of Rakdos' Return, and a Xenagos the Reveler, so the Planeswalker, and then 1 Mizium Mortars to go along with his Singleton in his main deck. Gotta like Mizium Mortars in the Overload here, or just the normal version, being able to kill Corsair, but the way that Brian's deck is kind of set up, the Overload seems like a real sound strategy to be able to win. Of course, Destructive Revelry, I think that Conklin's got a better idea of what he's up against. Now these things, Line of Blossoms. He saw Brainbag, he saw Corsair, he saw Banishing Light, so he has to imagine, okay, I'm up against some sort of enchantment constellation deck, so all right, I will bring those in. So having 3 copies of that is certainly nice for him. Ooze in this kind of creature combat match is probably pretty good here as well, so I actually like the options that Chris has available to him for this matchup.
Yeah, 3 Destructive Revelry really stood out to me because in this particular matchup, that's just awesome. And, you know, you get to, really, you know, the damage is obviously could be relevant, but really just having a 2-mana answer to Corsair of Krufix is just huge, because obviously that's one of the cards that Brian really cares about, along with Eidolon of Blossom. So just being able to kill those cards very efficiently for a deck like Jund Monsters, that's a huge boon there after sideboard.
This kind of constellation strategy is, you know, kind of built around Eidolon, but, you know, also the Corsair interactions with the Scrylands certainly does help to facilitate some really, really good draws. This was a very popular strategy at the Block Constructed Pro Tour 2 weeks ago. Don't know how well it translates into Standard, but Brian is certainly trying. Again, he's got 4 copies of Doomweight Giant, 4 copies of Eidolon, 4 Corsairs, 3 Brain Maggots, 4 Banishing Lights. You know, there's a load of enchantments here to be able to get this engine online.
Yeah, I think the deck definitely has some good matchups. I think that Mono Black Devotion could theoretically be a good matchup simply because you have a lot of problematic cards like Eidolon of Blossom is a kind of difficult card for them to deal with. They're losing card advantage. You also have Underworld Connections as well, and you also have more main deck answers to Underworld Connections because you have Banishing Light in addition to Abrupt Decay. So along with Elspeth, which can just win games on its own. So I think you definitely are probably pretty good against mid-rangey type decks, but I think aggressive decks could be somewhat problematic just because you can get kind of slow starts. And decks that just have really high-end, powerful threats like Jund Monsters, that could be somewhat difficult too, just because you really don't have that many answers to Stormbreath Dragon. Game 1, you basically have 3 Heroes Downfall. You obviously have 2 copies of Elspeth, which could help. And then you have 4 Doomweight Giants, which theoretically could, but you're working pretty hard to kill a Stormbreath Dragon.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. I think there is definitely a weakness here to Stormbreath Dragon. As you mentioned, Elspeth, you're going to get hit before that happens, presumably. And then you've got the 3 copies of Heroes Downfall, but we saw Brian use 2 of those right away in that first game. Those additional Doomblades in the sideboard will help, but there is definitely a weakness here to the 4/4 flyer with protection from white. So we'll see if Brian's able to overcome that as we begin game 2 here in just a moment for you guys at home. Do appreciate you joining us early this morning here in Indianapolis, round 1 of 10 for our Standard Open. 2 weeks until the Season 2 Invitational in Columbus.
It's going to be a big one.
It is going to be a lot of fun 2 weeks from now. Of course, next weekend we will be in Providence, but this weekend we are here in Indy. Always love coming back to the Midwest. When we were here earlier this year, as BBD does take a mulligan, looks like Conklin is going to keep. I know you weren't here for the Polar Vortex, but Patrick Sullivan and I were. Patrick hanging out in New Jersey this weekend, but all weather is good here. We're okay. We were out of the town last night.
Weather is very nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I've never been to the city before. It's very nice. I like it, although the Pacers lost, so everyone was in a melancholy mood, but
yeah,
it was still pretty good.
Reality did finally strike for the city of Indianapolis, excuse me. Look, I can say that I lived here for 5 years.
Yes.
I can say that.
So the tough thing about the sideboard games for BBD is that he has to contend with more abrupt decays in all likelihood and those destructive reveries. He probably doesn't know about them, but he has to assume that there's some sort of enchantment removal.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm playing decks that play Banishing Light, like I played Green-White Devotion last week, and I had Banishing Light, and there were games where I had to actually just board out my Banishing Lights because it's just too bad if you try to use it to get out a threat and they just abrupt decay it or destroy it somehow. So unfortunately for Brian's deck, because he has so few removal and he's not really a proactive deck, I'm not sure he can afford to board out those Banishing Lights. So there could be games where we just see him get blown out by like a timely destructive reverie or abrupt decay.
Brian was maybe considering mulliganing there, but the last card he rolled off was a Godless Shrine, so he is going to keep. Plays Northern Tomb tapped, passes the turn. There is Godless Shrine, so he's going to go down to 18. And this is a copy of Mana Bloom for 1 before passing the turn back. You saw Conklin go down to 18 on his end as well to start the game off with an Elvish Mystic. We'll see what he has to do on the second turn, which is another Stomping Ground. So down to 16 he goes. Maybe it's Planeswalker time. Sylvan Caryatid and another Elvish Mystic. So he's just ramping into something very scary. And you can see a Stormbreath Dragon in his hand right now.
Yeah, if you're Brian, you can't be excited to see that type of ramp. But
you could be excited about that Doomblade, though.
There's the Doomblade for Brian. Ooh, Chris draws a Nykthos, a card that I did not think he had in his deck.
A 2-of.
That makes sense. Again, Burning Tree Emissary makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so this is an interesting take on Jund Monsters here.
This is 5 mana. That's a Stormbreath Dragon into the red zone. Braun-Duin's going to go down to 14. Doomblade will take care of that, however, as Brian's going to draw that card. Mana Bloom's going to go back to the group as well. See if he can find a land. He does not. Oof. He finds a copy of Doomwake Giant. We're a long way away from that one.
When you need a land and you reveal a Doomwake Giant, you can't possibly feel good.
Doomblade going to take care of that. Courser going to hang out, pass the turn back over to Conklin. Conklin draws a copy of Xenagos.
Wow.
God of Revels.
And it looks like he has a Burning Tree in his hand as well, so he could actually get that Xenagos God of Revels into play and have it be active.
He also has a copy of Abrupt Decay and Dreadbore, so he can take care of the Courser if he wants as well. The world is his oyster right now. There's a Burning Tree Emissary. This is a bunch of mana. That is a Xenagos. And trigger, get in there for 4. Before passing the turn back. Of course, Xenagos cannot target itself, so it's not completely busted. It's merely just very good. Oh, look, another Doomwake Giant.
Those giants are really mocking Brian right now. Running giants.
All Brian can do is kind of shake his head and laugh right now.
Yeah, and Chris can actually just kill the Courser on his turn, so Brian won't get another shot at a land here. So yeah, this is going to be, I can't see Brian coming out of this one.
I think he can kill the Courser and kill Brian next turn. I think that's what we may see end up happening here.
Sometimes you want running giants, and sometimes you don't.
That's true.
This is one of those scenarios where you do not.
They may have been helpful last game. They're certainly not helpful in this one. Brian gonna tap. I think this is a Mana Bloom. Yeah, just bloom for 1 and pass the turn back. He has a plan in theory. It's not much of one. Conklin going to quickly untap her. You see the 2 removal spells. Picked up a Courser for the turn. That one doesn't matter very much. This is 2 mana. There's an Abrupt Decay to clear that out of the way. We'll see some attackers here in just a moment.
So 13 damage we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about a bunch of damage. There's a Courser. Top card's an Abrupt Decay. Trigger the Xenagos. Let's get into the red zone. That's an extension of the hand. Chris Conklin does win round number 1 here in Indianapolis. 2 games to 0. Jund Monsters taking down Brian Braun-Duin, playing Black-Green Constellation.
So very interesting take here. Jund Monsters, more of a devotion-fueled version. Really wants to get those gods online. Has a couple of copies of Nykthos. The Nykthos seems interesting in this deck. I don't know if there's really that much that he wants to, like he has, I think, 1 copy of Garruk in his main deck.
So he's got 1 Garruk, he's got 1 Mortars. As far as other things he can do with the mana, Stormbreath Dragon, Monstrosity activation, Pulachronos Monstrosity activation, Nylea, multiple activations there. The thing I actually like about Nykthos in this deck is that it's just a 2-of, so it's not like a Nykthos deck.
Yeah.
You know, it's not built around it. It's just like, you know, there are draws that I can have where if I draw Nykthos and things line up, I can do some pretty crazy and cool stuff. But if I, you know, the other devotion decks, you know, they're all, if I don't draw Nykthos, my deck is actually pretty bad.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I actually do like about this particular build of this deck. Again,